Thank you, Jude. I might ask for Jude, Gary and Donna to return just for 5 to 10 minutes to take some questions from the audience. I know it's getting tough and we're cocktails are like just moments away, people. Do we have any questions from the floor? Yep, there's just sorry.
Did you get your glasses back?
I was going to ask about the smudge that's
Is it on? No. This question is for Jude. Can you tell me, in your various roles, whether or not you have an opinion on the merits of the forced local authority amalgamations that have happened in southeast Queensland in terms of the efficiency of the delivery of services, be they water, electricity, transport or anything else? I just preface that by saying that I lived on the Darling Downs at a time when there was a rash of those forced amalgamations, and one of which was in Warwick, where I grew up. And the residents of those 4 local authorities were all told that they would benefit from improved services, lower rates, and for the most part, depending on whether they were rural or the city shire, they would all benefit and be very happy with the result. Well, I don't think many of those people asked now would agree that that's been achieved. So I'd like to ask you, from your observation, whether amalgamations of local authorities in the way it's been done has brought about significant benefits or disbenefits.
Yeah, I think that case is a very particular one, because I asked someone in authority the other day what was the success or failure of the amalgamations in Queensland, and the Darling Downs was particularly mentioned to me as being problematic. I think the government was actually very wise in leaving the Western Queensland councils and the Northern Queensland councils that are the North-West councils. Really, they didn't change them. I'm doing some work in Tasmania at the moment exactly on that same question, and one councillor said it's no good bringing 2 dead ducks together, all you get is a dog. And the comment was really being made about that there are unsustainable councils, or almost unsustainable councils. They've got huge distances that they have to cover. It's highly problematic bringing 2 of them together. You might save a CEO's salary, but your costs with communication and travel and distance and service delivery make absolutely no difference. There are also, imagine bringing Sydney and Melbourne together and saying, well, look, here we are, they're almost joined up, let's bring them together. Or Launceston and Hobart would be a case in point. There are community towns in various parts of Australia where I don't know what happened 50 years ago or 100 years ago, but they absolutely hate each other, and trying to get them to merge is like, it's really hitting your head up against a brick wall, and why would you do it? On the other hand, metropolitan Australia, it is difficult in South Australia, where metropolitan Adelaide is such a dominant part. But I have to say, having been the CEO of Brisbane City Council and having been the CEO of other councils, I can see enormous benefit from bringing some of the metropolitan councils together. I can see that. And I can also see merging regional councils. If I can say, in Victoria they used to be called the Donut Shires, effectively an urban area with some surrounding urban areas. Bendigo used to have 6 councils that they all went to the same school together and they didn't hate each other. Well, that was really logical, bringing them together, and made Bendigo, and it made Ballarat, and it certainly made Geelong much more strategic And similar things could happen in metropolitan Australia, provided that there's a principle of subsidiarity and the hierarchy of preservation of local government to state is preserved. But there are exceptions. I accept that. I'm doing some work for the 12 Southern Tasmanian councils at the moment, and we will be recommending some serious amalgamations in metropolitan Hobart.
There's another question. Oh, excellent. You don't want to drink cocktails. Sorry. Thanks, Sophie. We'll go over here next.
I'm on it. Keep my thumb on. I'm not keeping my thumbing on it hard enough, am I? Hello. There's a question for Donna. My thumb's not strong enough.
I can hear you.
Oh, good, Donna. My voice is strong enough.
It is very clear.
A question was about, you mentioned that Adelaide doesn't have the sort of history of medium density housing that Sydney, Melbourne, and I suppose more, other than more recently, Brisbane has got. You mentioned you're talking about community engagement. What sort of things are you doing? And you did mention in your presentation the strong position your minister's taken. We found up here politicians often go missing when these things need to be defended in the public realm. Well, what are you doing which might be different from what's being done in other cities in that regard?
I don't actually think we'll be doing much that's different, because from my observation of what other jurisdictions are doing in relation to engaging with new technologies to engage communities in different ways from the traditional kind of public meeting, that's happening more in Adelaide as it is happening across Australia. But what people are doing incredibly well at the moment now is actually creating these 3D visualisation packages, and there's a few very clever firms across Australia that are actually milking that dramatically at the moment, including Urban Circus is one of them, but you can get cheaper ones than that. Such are our budget constraints. But we've used a particular firm to help us with this, but we're also upskilling our own people in doing that. We have, I'm very blessed, I have 4 spatial boys, we call them, but they're absolute aces at GIS, and they're working with a local firm to produce these visualisation packages, which we will go and show to communities. And I use that word in the plural quite deliberately, because there is never a single community, there's always a community's interests. But we'll also be enabling people to access that technology from remote locations as well, and using the kinds of opportunities that the internet provides. Bearing in mind, of course, that Adelaide, probably more so than other jurisdictions, has a very a more elderly population, and there will always remain a place for people like me to go out, and it's certainly something we're not going to lessen because we have other means available to us. But that's what we're trying to do at the moment. And we're also obviously using councils as key points of entry, given that they are very close to their local communities, and certainly closer than state government to their local communities.
Yep. There's a question here.
Hello, it's John Brockhoff from the Metropolitan and Regional Strategies in New South Wales Government. I'd like to ask the panel if you can give us any tips on resolving the tensions that we have in city planning between embracing a vision for a city such as Sydney, where I come from, towards achieving a more compact network city of cities, and I guess the pushback that we have in some circles around that we want to shun an inflexible end state view of planning. And I sense from what Gary was saying that he might have had that same pushback from those people that said his plans were aspirational. And I sense that that we're continuing to struggle, particularly in Sydney, between not wanting to embrace a vision. I'd like to throw that to the panel.
I'll open the batting there, and Jude might follow, because it's a segue to the first COAG workshop that we had in Adelaide, where we were talking about just the subject you just raised. I mean, everybody's talking about the logic of having a more compact urban city. Jude's just raised those issues about peak oil. But we've got to get much more clever at evidence-based engagement with communities, and let the communities realise that to some extent they have to make the decisions as part of this process and not necessarily just the planners, because from my own experience, I was quoting an example to somebody at the coffee break before, and Di was involved in that discussion as well. And it was when I was involved in planning in the Redland, and I was trying to get the community to engage around issues to do with koalas. And so we just basically said, well, look, la-di-da-di-da, this is the process. In 2011, we don't have a koala problem, and now I'd like to talk about transportation. And somebody said to me, well, Gary, how did you solve the koala problem? I said, we don't have any. Because if you continue to develop at the rates that we're doing at the moment from the evidence that we have, you don't have a koala issue. And people say, well, that's just not satisfactory. You've got to do something about that. I said, look, what's this you got to do about it? Isn't that a collective we in terms of the evidence that you've heard? And I think we've got to get far more clever at engaging our community so they realise some of the issues as opposed to us planners pushing it back the other way. I mean, I would have to develop my skills, I think, because I think that engagement is such an important part of the process. Because I think once the community understand and start making the decisions, then you transcend those political boundaries which Jude talked about, those 2-year, 3-year cycles. But that was the same challenge that we had up at Townsville. We had to get people to realise what the decisions that they were making and how they were going to influence those long-term issues. And I think we've got to get a lot more clever at doing that.
Jude, did you want to add? No?
I think also we need to recognise that there will be changes of government, and any new government needs to be given breathing space to come to grips with information that they may not have had access to before. At that first Adelaide workshop, Nick Greiner, who was a previous New South Wales Premier, jocularly said that the new South Wales Premier would have to come to grips with the fact that when he repudiated the infill target of the previous government, that he wasn't, I think Nick said he was mad or something like that. Now, Nick Greiner's been appointed as the chair of his infrastructure council, so it's not like they would, in the same political party, that they would have differences. But there was a reality check, and people will do things in standing for elections that maybe they do know the evidence, but they'll say something in order to get elected. So I think you have to give new governments breathing space, and then I hope what happens is that there's a return to some of the policies. Sometimes they get given a different name because they've got to be marketed differently, but essentially they'll be the same policy. Sydney can't afford to become really huge. None of our cities can. And I think some of those trends I spoke about, as people become clear about what the implications of that are, there's going to have to be some really pretty radical rethinking about cities.
Can I just add two things about that? Adelaide's been in a rather fortunate position to be able to start talking about more compact living, and because of course we don't have the kind of growth pressures that Sydney in particular faces, nor some of the topographical kind of constraints. Your transport system is just a mess. I don't mean that rudely, but to actually plan for growth and providing a transport system to facilitate that growth is just, it's a planner's nightmare. But I just want to tell a bit of a story about this notion of vision, and it's one that's been bandied about again more in a popular way. It came about in planning and architecture in the early 90s. Everyone was touting the word vision. It's fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And at the time in Adelaide, we were actually developing a strategic plan that was almost like a precursor, if you like, to the 30-year plan for Greater Adelaide. And I remember that we got Des Eccles from Melbourne, an academic in Melbourne. You would really remember Des, Phil, I'm sure. And Des had a particular eye And part of that was because a vision tends to articulate a common ground, and you've got to ask whose common ground. We, at the moment, live in a world where constantly we are integrating the economy, constantly we're seeking to integrate the environment, but the social body is becoming increasingly disintegrated because it's pervaded through all sorts of cleavages, it's diverse, it's very different. And as a result, we cannot ever, as planners, and especially because the great majority of these come from very specific social cultural backgrounds, we can never claim to say that a vision is necessarily going to be an agreed position for everyone, unless it's a vision that basically articulates things that we can't, that's difficult to disagree with. We have to be very careful when we talk about vision, because I think there is a potential in there to marginalise significant groups of people.
Thank you, Donna. Might just let if there's one more brave soul who's willing to stand between us and you are, David, you are? The one last question.
Hi, David Park, and I'm the CEO of the Institute of Architects, and we're obviously very supportive of strategic planning and having good policy, having community consultation, and obviously the work of COAG and the COAG Reform Council. But when it gets down to the fine grain and the actual decision making of implementing, and Gary, I was really interested in your talk, I guess our observations and really my members' frustration is the fact that often the planner will be there advising a council and saying, "Yep, we're short-staffed. We went and got an independent report. It complies with the policy. It ticks all the boxes. Our recommendation is approval." And there you are, 11 o'clock on a Tuesday evening in a council planning meeting, and the mayor says, "Well, actually, David, yeah, I've got all this stuff, and I've heard everything that you've got to say, but actually I don't like red roofs and I don't like flat roofs and I don't like you, and I'm going to vote against it." And so you've got a real issue there with politicising the decision making. And then, of course, we go off to, the Land Environment Court or something. I mean, in Sydney, a lot of my members get in the queue for the Land Environment Court at the same time as they're lodging for the DA because of the merit process and everyone objecting. So I'm just interested in what the panel says about, and Donna, you're going to face this as well. I mean, there is resistance, and we win 90% of those appeals, but the cost is passed on to the community. So I'm just very interested in about, the ideas of independent planning panels. South Australia's doing that. I'm not sure where Queensland's at with it. Yeah. They're not. Okay, we've got the DAF leading practice model, so I just wouldn't mind a comment on that. And Jude, one comment from you about how do we keep the COAG process running?
Do you want me to talk about the panels first? Yeah. South Australia has had independent development assessment panels, or DAPs, for want of a better word, since 2007. What happened at that time was, prior to that, most DAPs had been purely elected members of councils, and the kind of response that you articulated, David, was often quite common. I think it's reduced, but it's still there. I was chair of the West Torrens Development Assessment Panel for about 4 years. What the legislation requires is that each panel has a majority of independent experts who council employ, and the presiding member has to be an independent member as well. So there is always a majority of independent members on the panel. That's been a raging success according to the industry. It's not to say that you still have politicisation of particular development approvals, and it's not to say that if an independent member doesn't like a red roof, or doesn't like a Tuscan kind of design, or doesn't like no eaves on the dwelling, that you don't get the same kind of response. So it still happens. Depoliticising the panel, though, is, I think, undoubtedly a very good thing, and it certainly has been greeted very positively in the Adelaide situation. And incidentally, it has led to a reduction in court cases, interestingly, in that time. So I'll just leave it at that.
I suppose I go back to that comment I said about correct calibration of applications. It seemed to me that the frustration of so many people in the development industry is the incorrect calibration of applications, simple, bleeding obvious applications being exposed unnecessarily to the interference. Some people use the term contribution or consultation. It's actually interference in but I think there's a connection to that correct calibration, and then potentially having and I think it is a pretty courageous decision. It certainly would be a very hard one in Queensland at the moment to say to local government that we're going to in effect put in those panels. It just would not be acceptable in Queensland. But I think it is acceptable in Queensland to talk about the correct calibration of application, and councils do accept that. In fact, our council of mayors here in South East Queensland, which John is part of, are pushing very strongly for more code-accessible applications, and that's around that notion of correct calibration. But it all gets back to what is the purpose and what is the planning document trying to do? Do you just have a collection of regulations which just have a life of their own, or are those regulations delivering something that's been articulated?
I should mention, just before you start, there was huge resistance to these panels in South Australia. There were a couple of elected members that refused to shake my hand when we were first appointed. And there's been a change around, and that has been facilitated by what happens is that most of the independent members get quite interested in planning policy in that local area, and therefore work with councils in that area, and that's accorded them legitimacy. But it's a long process.
Yeah, well, I support local democracy, and I don't support, this is just a personal view, I don't support independent people. I'd like advisory processes, but I think that people, they end up being like quangos of unelected people taking decisions. And we can have debates about that. Stephen Haynes is a mate of mine, and he chairs a few of those Adelaide panels, and I'm very respectful of those processes, but fundamentally they're undemocratic. What should happen is that the capacity for developers to provide any funds to political parties should be stopped. And then there wouldn't be an issue. As to the COAG process continuing, if there have been benefits from collaboration, it will be those who have benefited, briefing those who will make the decision, that will then see it continue.
Thank you, Jude. Well, thank you again for our panel for the final session this afternoon. Thank you. It was quite a fitting ending to a very long day, and I do appreciate everyone's attention and hope you've been inspired and invigorated by some of the thoughts and ideas that have been shared here. It comes back to some of the points that we were talking about this morning or I was talking about this morning in terms of what I felt was my responsibility as a planner. And there's been a number of different themes that have come through in all of the presentations that we've had today. The fact that we need to make sure that we are using evidence to base our decisions and to keep ourselves informed about what the existing situation is and what some of the future challenges are that we may have to deal with. It is our responsibility, I feel, to engage with that community and to ensure that we can communicate to them in an effective manner and bring them into the roles that we play in terms of planning for the future. It's a very tough job to be able to be a very good communicator, but I think we have the intellect and we also have the knowledge about how the upper echelons work and the politics work to be able to inform our communities and to ensure that they can actually participate in planning processes in an informed way. We do need the leadership, and again, I think that's part of our responsibility as being the middleman, to manage upwards, to ensure that our leaders are informed, to give them the best opportunity to lead us in the right direction. The focus on outcomes, to be innovative and not to be scared to be innovative. That's what our job is to do, is to be proactive, ensure we're doing the best that we can for the communities that we're planning for. We are planning for communities that are going to be here 50 years, 100 years, 150 years going on forward. So it's quite a large responsibility, and I think we should take that seriously. I felt that we really did celebrate the profession of planning for cities and the fact that we are achieving so much in the Commonwealth cities. There is a long way to go, and we certainly know that hearing the stories from some of our comrades outside of Australia, that there's certainly there should be some different tools and some different mechanisms that they may use compared to what we've done here in Australia, but we certainly do have a lot of experience in Australia and New Zealand that we can impart on some of our Commonwealth colleagues. So I conclude day one. Tomorrow it's more about yourselves talking, so we'll actually have small group workshops focused around the 3 topics about measuring for resilience, again governing in trying times and strategic planning, so it follows the same similar sort of format as today. And it's really about having that discussion, sharing your experiences as planners of what you feel your role is in those 3 particular areas. We now have, the fun can begin with having a little cocktail function out onto the terrace. There's a couple of little DVDs that will be shown. Christine will have her DVD shown regarding the future cities, and we'll also be sharing some stories about the Planning Institute of Australia's program for the Sri Lanka post-tsunami effort. So thank you very much for your attention today. Tomorrow we'll be starting at 9:30 a.m. in Auditorium 1, which is actually just across the way. But if you come in through tomorrow morning, we'll lead you in the right direction. Also, one final housekeeping message. Austin wanted me to let you know that the Global Cities Indicators